My name is Sheryl McWilliams. I'm a wellness specialist here at Midcoast Parkview Health, and we're super excited that you're here. I see a lot of familiar, friendly, fun faces, and I see some new ones too, and that's always exciting. So welcome. Historically, this program has never required registration, and it still doesn't. However, because our numbers are growing a little bit, if you could give us a call ahead of time and let us know that you're coming, just so that we can make sure we have enough handouts for everybody. Not a problem. We want everybody to come. Everybody's welcome. Next time, bring a friend. All right? So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different because I had two different people in the class ask for it, and one of them, who is really insistent on it, I haven't seen yet. So she better show up. And that was because Easter is coming. We all have family traditions at Easter, or at all holidays, right? And there were two different individuals that said, we do cheesecake every year at Easter in our family, and I don't know what to do. So tonight we're having cheesecake, all right? Cheesecake. Normally we do entrees and that sort of thing, but tonight it's something a little fun, a little bit special. This is not what I would call a health food. It's a less bad for you food, right? It's something that we save for special occasions, but we all have those special occasions, right? And when those special occasions come, it's nice to have something that we can prepare and that we can enjoy and that we know is probably not going to kill us. You know, that's always helpful. But this is definitely not something that I would eat every day. This is something that we want to save for a special occasion, okay? And with that caveat, we're going to go ahead and get started. So for the crust of our cheesecake, I cheated tonight because I thought we had plenty of granola in my cupboard. I make large amounts of it and I keep it in gallon jars, and I went in and my girls had eaten all of our granola. So I cheated and bought some, which is, you know, fine. But when you if you're buying granola versus making it, you really want to read those ingredients, because a lot of granolas out there, it's just sugar with a little bit of something else. You want all the whole grains and the seeds and the nuts, and if it is sweetened, you want that to be at the bottom end of the ingredient list, not at the top, right? I prefer to make my own. It's cheaper, it's tastier, and I get to control what goes in it. And I get to control how it is sweetened, right? So for us, we usually sweeten ours with dates, sometimes raisins, but usually dates. So what I did was I took granola and I put it in my blender, and I blended it for about 10 seconds. And it just makes a powder.
Which brand did you buy?
This one is Ancient Grains by Nature's Path. There are lots of different ones out there. I made this for my family this past weekend, and I used Little Lads granola. So I whizzed it down to a powder. It took about 10 seconds, a little less perhaps. And then we're going to add about 2 teaspoons of coriander. I'm a coriander fan. I use it in a lot of different things. And it calls for 2 teaspoons of honey, but this granola was sweetened, so I'm not going to use the honey. Okay, there's no need to add that extra honey. 3 to 4 tablespoons of water. Do what's that? It's called the granola crumb crust. So I'm going to mix that up. Now, I usually don't use oil in my cooking. I prefer to use nuts or avocado or olives, depending upon what it is that I'm making. And for the crust for you guys, I used all my walnuts. So for this one, I am going to use a little bit of olive oil. But normally this calls for like 2 tablespoons of olive oil or walnuts. I would just put in a handful of walnuts in with the granola while it's being whizzed up, and that'll whiz them right down. And that gives me enough fat to be able to bind that crust together. Does that make sense? All right, but I used all my walnuts, so I'm going to use oil this time. And I'm only going to use a tablespoon because I think that's enough. So I've got my granola, coriander, a little bit of oil, water, and we're skipping the honey because that granola was sweetened. Now, this is actually a little wetter. I should probably have only used about 3 of those tablespoons of water, but that's okay. So I'm going to put that in the bottom of my dish, and this will make a 9 by 13 dish. So if you wanted to make a smaller amount, just cut it in half. I don't know how it would freeze. I'm assuming the texture of the tofu would probably change if you froze it. But you could try that. It doesn't last long enough in my family to be able to freeze it. Yeah, this is really wet. Sorry about that, guys. Yours was not this wet. If I hadn't added so much water, I could press this down with my hand. Just like you do a regular crumb crust, like if you made it from graham crackers, same idea. All right, so we'll call that good. And now we'll get on to our filling. So I'm going to demonstrate the top one, which is the cheesecake. And we use 4 cups of mashed tofu. Now, for those of you who've been to our programming before, what kind of tofu do we use?
Organic.
Yay! Why do we use organic?
Because you don't want to use anything else.
True. I won't use anything else, but why? Why won't I use non-organic tofu? Or anything soy? GMO is one reason for sure. Any other ideas?
If it's not organic, it's been overly processed and it has soy protein isolate in it.
It can, yep, not always, but it absolutely can. Another reason is to avoid glyphosate, which is which is like a herbicide that's really not good for you, and it will mess up your gut and cause all sorts of troubles. Now, for the tofu, you'll notice that I'm squeezing the water out of it, right? Now, if I was fancy, I would get a masher and mash it, you know, because this is just faster, because this is going to go into the blender anyway, right? This is extra firm because that's all that I buy. I hardly ever buy anything else. So I'm just going to mash it up so that my blender's not having to deal with, you know, great big chunks of it. And then we're going to add to that, calls for 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I usually just use about 1 teaspoon. I'm using Himalayan salt. Why would I do that? Matches my sweater. Because we have to match. Why would I use Himalayan salt? Any ideas?
Minerals.
Minerals. All right. We're going to use a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. And actually, I'm going to use 2 tablespoons because this is going to be consumed by my family, and they really like it lemony. And 1 lemon this size gives you about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. All right, so we've got our lemon juice. Now it calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I don't use it, and I don't replace it, and I haven't had any trouble. So there's that. A couple tablespoons of vanilla. One, 2. Half a cup of pineapple juice. And half a teaspoon of coriander. Okay. Did we get everything here? We got the tofu. Oh, the honey. Yeah, we got the honey. So, I am using honey here, and I did use honey with yours, only because my dates are rock hard. Normally, I use dates instead of honey. Why would I do that? There's fiber, yeah. So the dates have a lower glycemic index. They're not going to bring my blood sugar up as high or as quickly, right? But I did use honey because this got to be really laborious. And for the purposes of tonight, I'm going to...
How many dates would you use?
So I used 2/3 of a cup of date butter, and I'm going to show you how to make that. So it calls for 2/3 of a cup, and I'm only going to use 1/3.
Health benefits to coriander?
That's a really good question that I don't know. Tim, are you here? Are you aware of any health benefits to coriander? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's good to my tongue. I don't know.
Yeah, it's quite a good source of antioxidants, as are most herbs. Yeah.
All right, so we've got our tofu, our salt, we skipped the oil, lemon juice, vanilla, honey, or date butter, and I'll show you how to make that in a moment, pineapple juice, and coriander, and we're going to give that a stir.
Cheryl,
Yes.
I know that you were talking about date butter. I use the date sugar. But, would you want to use that, or is that bad?
I would not want to use that because the sugar's been separated well, it depends on how it's made, but I prefer using the whole fruit. So by using the date butter, it's the whole fruit that's just been softened with water and whizzed up. Do you have any ideas on that, Tim?
You're exactly right. It depends on how it's made. Some date sugar is simply dates that are dehydrated further and ground up. That's fine. But you need to read the label and see, have they taken the fiber out or not? Sugar is sugar, whether it comes from beets or sugar cane or dates.
That's right.
Unless it's the whole date, then no problem at all.
So we're just going to put this mixture, about half of it, into our blender to blend. And when I say blend, we're going to make it creamy, all right? Okay, hold your ears for a minute. stir it for a moment. I'm really spoiled. I have a Vitamix at home, and so I don't have to stir it or anything. It just does it for me. All right, hold your ears. Okay, so I'm going to take this now and I'm going to pour it over the crust. Spread it out. I would do that to this next round as well, but there's no need to accost your eardrums. But you get the idea, right? So that's the cheesecake. I would finish this and pour it in, and then I would bake it at 350 for about half an hour. 20 to 30 minutes. It depends on your oven. But you're going to bake it until the edges begin to brown a little bit, and that center has set, all right? If I can shake it and it's still dancing around, it's not done yet, okay? So you want the edges to be slightly browned and that center set. And then, once I've taken it out of my oven, I'm just gonna sit it aside to cool, all right? And then comes the fun part. You saw how easy that is. It doesn't take any time. It's fun. So then we're going to get on to the topping. So I chose for tonight the strawberry topping. You can do strawberry, you can do blueberry, you can do fresh fruit sliced up. Because we're dealing with, a lot of people tonight, I did it in like a casserole dish. But you could do it in a nice round, like traditional round cheesecake dish, and make it beautiful with fresh strawberries and raspberries and kiwi and whatever you want on top of it. But for tonight, we are going to do the strawberry topping. So what we do with that is we want 4 cups of whole unsweetened frozen strawberries. All right? And we're going to get those out last night, literally last night. And we're going to set them out on the counter at room temperature for them to defrost. And when they defrost at room temperature overnight, you're going to get lots of liquid. I don't think you guys can see that very well because if I pour it over too much, we are going to have a mess. But you get the idea, right? There's liquid. And we're going to pour that liquid into our blender. And then we're going to add to that, oh, look at that, I'm using the wrong thing. We're going to add to that some apple juice concentrate. That's not it, this is it. Now, I do like to use organic apples and apple juice if I ever use it. Apples to me are kind of like soy. There are some things that I only do organic, and apples is one of them. It is hard to find frozen apple juice. Occasionally you can, but it is hard, to be honest. And I did find 2 cans. So there were 2 cans that were organic. This one is not, because I used the organic for you guys. So just going to pour that right in there. And then it calls for a 1/16 of a teaspoon of salt. That's a pinch. and it calls for 3 tablespoons of thickener. Now, in our house, we use tapioca. Why would we use tapioca? Tapioca flour. Why would you use tapioca? I'll tell you why. Because I tried to buy 5 pounds of tapioca flour, and I ended up with 50 pounds of tapioca flour. I am not kidding you. And so in our house, if something needs thickening, it is thickened with tapioca flour. So yours is thickened with tapioca flour. But I left that jar of tapioca flour sitting on my counter. So imagine that this was tapioca flour. I stole it from the cupboard. It's cornstarch, all right? I never use cornstarch for a whole host of reasons. And in fact, I'm not going to use this one either because it's not organic. Corn is another one of those things. I don't eat everything organic. There are some things that I only eat organic, and corn is one of them, okay? So if this was organic, I would put it in here, but it's not. So I'm not, all right? But just imagine that I put 3 tablespoons of agar-agar or tapioca flour or any of those things. I would then put that in my blender and I would blend it up, all right? Blend, blend, blend. I won't accost your ears. And all that's doing is, you know, getting that thickener fully immersed into that liquid, all right? Then I'm going to take it out and I'm going to put it in a pan. And I'm going to stand here. It takes about 3 minutes. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to stir it for about 3 minutes because that's how long it's going to take for that liquid to thicken. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm just going to stir it, stir, stir, stir. And when you first pour it in here, it's cloudy because that powder is in there, right? It's cloudy. But as you stir it, it goes from cloudy to more of a clearish color. Depending on what you use, it may or may not get completely clear, right? So when I use tapioca flour, it does not get completely clear, but almost. So I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to thicken that. And once that's good and thick, then I'm going to pour my strawberries right into there, all right? And I'm going to stir that around. And then those strawberries are going to have that thick glaze all over them, right? Once this has not completely cooled, but you know, cooled down enough that I can handle the dish, I'm then going to take those strawberries and I'm going to pour it over the top of my cheesecake, and then I'm going to put that in the fridge. All right? And then after that sets, you're going to come out with something that looks like this. I put frozen blueberries on top. Sometimes I will make the blueberry sauce and the strawberry sauce and we'll layer it. But for you guys for tonight, I just put blueberries on top, all right? Do what's that? 4th of July, that's right. So not difficult, but you do want to cool it because that really helps it to set better, okay? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a reason you don't put the entire batter in the Vitamix? Why just half and then half?
Because it will bog down your machine. And you'll end up standing there like I was having to do and push it down and that sort of thing. If you just do half, then it'll do it fairly quickly. Now, I squeezed out a tremendous amount of liquid. Had I not squeezed out quite so much liquid, it would have gone a little bit easier. But yeah, yes, ma'am.
Is there ways to soak the dates to make them less hard?
Yes, that's the perfect segue. Thank you, because the next thing we're going to make is the date butter. Because if you choose to make the carob cheesecake, it is sweetened with the date butter. Now, what I do, here it is. Okay. So before you guys got here, I went ahead and chopped up the dates, because honestly, these dates are rock hard. I didn't realize they had gotten quite that dehydrated. I took a cup of dates and I covered them. The recipe says, I think it's 3/4 of a cup of water. Yeah, 3/4 of a cup of water. I covered them with a cup of water because these are so very dry. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in my blender. So this date thing is fantastic. When we make apple crisp in the winter, you know, isn't a cold day just made all the better with a little bit of apple crisp? We don't put any sugar in our apple crisp. It's only dates. In fact, a 9 by 13 pan, 2 dates is all you need. And this is precisely how I do it. I'll take those 2 dates, pour a little bit of hot water over it, and let them soak until they're soft, and then I just mush them.
Do you take the nuts out of the dates before you do all that?
You take the seeds out. Yeah, absolutely. I will just,
The flesh of the date.
so I'd have a date and a knife, and I just cut it long ways, and then that seed comes right out, and I throw it away. And then I soak it. So hang on to your earballs for a minute. Here we go. All right, so then I can keep this in my refrigerator. It'll last for about 2 weeks in the refrigerator in a little jar. I usually, frankly, don't do that. I will make it as I need it. So if I'm making an apple crisp, I know I'm a 2-date girl. If I'm making the cheesecake with the dates, you know, then I'll make a full recipe. Because it's going to require that. So very rarely do I keep this in my refrigerator. My sister keeps this in her refrigerator because she makes cookies and all sorts of things that needs all sorts of sweetening. Me not quite so much. But it's a great thing to have in your refrigerator to be able to use when you want something sweet and you don't want to use sugar in it. Because what kind of nutritional value does sugar have? Yeah, none. What does it do? Pulls your blood sugar up, right? And we don't need that, all right? So by using the dates, it's not going to pull your blood sugar up as high. So that's the date butter. And when I make this for my family, I usually sweeten it with the dates, all right? Yours was sweetened with honey, but typically it's going to be sweetened with the dates. And the chocolate, I always sweeten with the dates. Yes, ma'am?
So if you were gonna just do 2 dates, how much water would you put in it?
So I put it in like a little teacup, and I just barely cover it. And then I put a little plate over that teacup to keep that hotness in, and I set it aside while I'm preparing the rest of the recipe. And by the end of that, it's done its thing. And if it's not enough to put in a whole blender, then I put it into my, what do you call it? Coffee grinder. I use a coffee grinder for grinding my flax seeds and some spices and that sort of thing. And it's a tiny little thing. So I put it in the coffee grinder and it whizzes it right up. Or sometimes if it's things that's already going in the blender, then I just put it with everything else in the blender, such as the batter for the cheesecake.
And when you're substituting for sugar in the recipe, how much
So you'd have to play with your recipe. Did you guys hear the question? The question was, if I was using the date butter as a substitute for sugar in a recipe, how much would I use? And you'd really have to play with the recipe. But for me, I'm from the South. We like our things sweet down there, right? So I normally will start with the full amount if it's something that's large. But if it's something smaller, like that's got other sweetness to it, like an apple crisp, because those apples are already sweet, I will start with half. And like a cheesecake where there's nothing sweet in it, it's just the tofu, I'd probably do the whole or maybe 3/4, but you will learn as you go. And everybody's recipe is a little bit different. But if it's already got some sweetness to it, hopefully that sweetness is natural, like apples or peaches or other kinds of fruit, then I would start with half. Yes?
If you have maple syrup, would that work since you can harvest it from your tree in the backyard?
You could use maple syrup. You'd have to adjust your liquid then at that point because the maple syrup is more liquefied than, say, honey or the date butter, but you can adjust for that. Yes, ma'am?
So your 2-date apple crisp is in a 9x13?
It's in a 9x13 pan. Yep. Okay. So if you were making the carob cheesecake, you'd make it just like I did the one for you here. The only difference is that you're adding carob powder, which is an alternative to chocolate. And then you can or cannot add a little bit of a coffee substitute. Some people like, a little bit of a coffee flavor. My husband does, I don't. What do you do? And then this recipe calls for date butter and honey. I usually just use the date butter because here's another trick for you. The recipe will say to use either like strawberry topping or blueberry topping. We do, but my girls like lots of strawberry topping. So I do not use that honey, and I just make a recipe and a half of the strawberry topping. I make more topping to go on top. The point is, there's no just one way to do it. It's something that you can experiment with and play with. But no matter what you do, it's going to be good. I do, though, like lots of color. So like tonight, I added those blueberries on top of the strawberries for you because it adds another dimension of flavor, but it also adds the nutritional value of those blueberries and those colors. Any questions? Okay, give me a couple minutes here. I'll get cleaned up and then we'll do some tasting.